What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, June 23rd. I'm taking your questions live. So welcome to everyone joining in, and we're going to dive right in, of course. We got a good topic for today. We have got a fun mailbag question. And the topic here for today, it is buy and sell veteran wide receivers specifically. And when I'm talking veteran wide receivers, I'm talking old guys, right? Old guys over 30. That is the qualification here. Are we buying or selling? Primarily in Dynasty, but I will also give you the opinion in redraft as well, so you can know how to tackle these players in both Dynasty and redraft, which guys are buys and which guys are fades. We will dive right in. I'm going to start off with buys, because let's start off in a happy place before I hurt feelings. Okay. No, I don't think I'm going to hurt any feelings this week. Maybe next week. So happy buy right here. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of disagreement on this one. It's Mike Evans, obviously. When we're looking at older veteran wide receivers, Mike Evans is one of those guys that you look at, and he has just been consistently one of the most reliable receivers in the league year after year after year. It never mattered the quarterback or the system. As long as someone was able to throw the ball up, he was able to come down with it. When we're talking about Mike Evans, obviously there are pros and cons to investing in, an aged receiver. He doesn't look aged. He doesn't play age, but he is in fact aged. So while we're looking at Evans, one thing we do have to consider here is that he is in the final year of his most recent contract. That is a big factor, right? We always look at contract with these veteran receivers to try and predict how much we can invest in them when we're either looking to buy or potentially sell these guys, what value they have on the market for us from a fantasy perspective. And that one might, make you a little bit nervous. Obviously, a guy like Keenan Allen, we'll talk about him in a little bit here. Once you get these guys and they're out of contract and they're older, it starts to become a weird situation. And I think last person we saw this with also was DeAndre Hopkins as well. That occasionally, when you get in a position, money is sometimes maybe a factor, maybe not a factor. You get in a position where you're trying to figure out, Super Bowl is not a problem, for Evans, but do you want to pursue another Super Bowl? Do you want to kind of figure out how to make this work as a whole, right? What are the priorities? Is where you want to live a priority and whatnot? So when we're looking at the Bucs organization, they have been very focused on retaining key face of the franchise talent, right? They've been very good about that in terms of those guys that they want to remain dedicated towards. They've shown that with Mike Evans. They've shown that with Chris Godwin. They even made that investment into Baker Mayfield here. And Evans, I think, is a strong candidate to actually receive an extension, remain with the Bucs through the remainder of his career, and not have to do that whole cycle through of where are we heading for the last few years. The Adam Thielen, where are we going to head to? What's it going to be? Or what kind of quarterback are we looking at? Do we have to worry about that? So I think we're kind of locked in here, hopefully, cross our fingers, and we're going to make that risk. We're going to take that leap with him. However, that's not the only thing there. Evans will be 32 at the beginning of this season, and the sample size for players that remain fantasy relevant past this age, it's very specific, right? Still, again, one of the most reliable receivers in the league, and the key here is that he has not shown any signs of regression, and last year was the perfect opportunity for us to really get a good look at him in terms of where he is at in his age. Last year, suffered a hamstring injury. Traditionally, obviously, that is something that would potentially linger, nag older receivers, like a Cooper Kupp situation, maybe. But Evans returned to literally perfect form. He managed to not only return to what he was before, he managed to take over an even greater workload when Chris Godwin went out and Mike Evans had to really be that aggressive target hog. He showed zero signs of regression there. When we're looking at him and moving forward, that one in terms of age being a factor, in terms of his physical regression, is not really a big one there for me. But we also have some other factors as well. 2025, we have the added caveat, a positive factor for Mike Evans would be the recovery time frame for Chris Godwin. He anticipates being ready for week 1. We know that often when that is said, that is not always the case there. And there is occasionally some kind of ramp up time period as well. So that could be something that kind of increases that fantasy value for Mike Evans earlier in the season. We do also have the added addition there of Emeka Egbuka, who I do love, but obviously that profile is more so somebody who can fit more of the Godwin type role. He's versatile, but I don't see it as a major threat to the role that Mike Evans has in that offense here. Evans should still be the primary target for us in terms of the dynasty investment that we're wanting to make in terms of the redraft. Easily having top 20 potential again as well. So in Dynasty, we are recommending him for a excellent little win now piece for contenders. The only thing is that, just be aware that you do need to be a true contender when you're buying him, because there's always the possibility, because he is on the end of that contract, that maybe he looks at this year and he says, I'm feeling good, I want to go out, at the end of my career, good franchise, age is right. You might be buying single usage, but the benefit here is that even if you're buying single usage, it is excellent single usage for this year if you were a true contender trying to win that championship this year. Redraft, best ball, no issues. Draft with joy. Love the ADP. No problem at all. Before we move on to my next buy, and it is another, again, we're doing receivers. For those of you joining in, we're doing receivers over the age of 30, whether they are buys or fades. We're on the buy portion right here. But before we do that, I want to hear a quick little word from our sponsors. So we're going to take a little break here. The Podfather is going to tell you everything that you need to know.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with superflex and tight end premium controls. And a Dynasty League sync, where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams, and then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs, and then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide, $25 value, is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to all in and get $25 off.
As Podfather mentioned, you can use your host promo code, and it's super easy. It's just Tera, T-E-R-A. We made it super easy for you if you want to get that package, which would be very helpful for your Dynasty teams. So let's jump back to the Dynasty discussion here. Before I jump over to the next player here, we got a really good comment here from the Harry Stillman. What's up, the Harry Stillman, who is also off to Portugal. Fancy. You have to love the Mike Evans playoff schedule. Atlanta, Carolina, at Miami, juicy. Yeah, 100%. And, and they're not the only ones. I mean, I'm not going to talk about any Carolina players on this one because we don't have any technically that we need to really speak about here from a fantasy perspective, in Dynasty in particular. But last year, and this has happened a lot with Miami, but I'm loving and not, this doesn't apply to Miami, but a lot of the schedules here for teams like Atlanta, Carolina, Tampa Bay, excellent end of season schedules, and overall strength of schedule as a whole, really good here. So I don't mind investing into these. And especially if you're looking ahead to the fantasy playoffs, there are some really good juicy ones here. Also, a reason why I don't really dislike anybody on Tampa. So love that comment. Thank you for sharing that one. Moving on to our next receiver here. It is Davante Adams. Davante Adams, a Los Angeles Ram now. And I'm sincerely hoping this one is work because I'm still writing in Superflex, writing a couple of Matt Stafford shares. So let's get it going here. Davante Adams, it's pretty simple here. When we're looking at Davante Adams, we can't really look too much at the season as a whole in terms of just overall numbers, just because it was kind of a weird season for him, right? He clearly suffered, quote unquote, if you're listening on the podcast, that was quotation marks for suffering an injury that got his exit out of Vegas to the Jets, which was a complete disaster anyway. But regardless of the fact that the Jets were flat out awful, Davante Adams still looked fantastic. I mean, it was a mess. it was a mess, but he still put up those numbers, right? Despite playing only 14 games last year, again, not due to injury, due to circumstances, Adams still managed to finish as the overall wide receiver 14.5 PPR and wide receiver 10 in average points per game. That's just flat out stupid. Visibly, again, very, very similar to Mike Evans. We see zero signs of regression with him. He is still pumping. He is still kicking. Even in a down year, he still manages to outproduce his younger counterparts. And he has been one of the most reliable volume receivers in the league for years. The concern that we have here is that he is going into a situation where he should be the wide receiver too. Now, obviously, when he went to the Jets, it was kind of close, but he did really dominate a little bit over Garrett Wilson. But when we're looking at him and Puka Nacua, I do think they should play very well off of each other. I do think that Puka Nacua is still going to operate as the wide receiver 1, but this is a very realistic scenario where we can see legitimately 2 top 10 receivers very, very easily out of this particular setup. The Rams offer the volume. Stafford has the capabilities. As long as he stays upright, they offensive line stuff. They kind of have to work through a little bit of stuff, but again, they seem prepared. And as long as they can work through that, there should be no issue. And Puka Nacua and Davante Adams should actually play off of each other very well here. So I love this one. Again, he is not the cheapest investment in Dynasty. He's still Davante Adams. And despite being 32, you're still going to have to, you can't throw the lowest value and expect to get him. But for a contending team, again, worth the investment here, a true win now piece that can potentially contribute major volume to you next season or this season, excuse me. And again, in redraft, same exact situation with Mike Evans. The ADP, beautiful. I see no issues with it. I love where he's being drafted. So this one is one that even though we get into that technical wide receiver 2 territory, I've got zero issue with it. Now I'm going to go to another one, a veteran wide receiver that you might have to be convinced a little bit on. I don't feel like I have to convince you on Mike Evans. I don't have to convince you on Davante Adams. We all love them. But I do think I'm going to have to convince you on Calvin Ridley and investing in him because it's the Tennessee Titans. But hear me out. When I thought about this and I was going through this and I was going through the receivers, my first instinct, instinctually, right, was to fade Calvin Ridley because why not, right? I'm not 100% sold that Cam Ward is the solution that is going to change everything for the Titans and push them in the positive direction that they need to go. It's still going to be a rebuilding process. They have good pieces. They've made investments, but this is still going to be a work in progress, probably similar to what we saw with Chicago last year. They're not the same player. Cam Ward and Caleb Williams, not the same player, but same kind of concept. A team that is still going to have to push through things, even though they are making the right investments for their team. But when we're looking at Calvin Ridley, there is a glaring problem. He hasn't put up wide receiver 1 numbers in 5 years, and he actually only did it 1 year. So you start to question, is this man actually a true wide receiver 1? And I don't think so. I don't. But he is in the buy category, so let's talk about it. I don't see a reality where Ridley operates as a top 12 receiver. I think that low-end wide receiver 2 is the best case scenario for him. But the good news is that's okay. It's baked into his cost. Perception is extremely low on Calvin Ridley. This is a guy that you can buy for a late 2022nd 2026 second. Oh, that one's gonna trip me up over the next couple of years. 2026 second. Okay. So you can buy him literally for like a late second. If someone is like, you can probably package into a third and throw something weird in. Like, people don't feel very positively about the potential for Calvin Ridley because, to be honest, he's probably not a true wide receiver 1. He is a guy that would benefit from playing off of a more stable volume receiver. I think he probably profiles more like, imagine if he had the same setup as Jamison Williams, where he was playing opposite of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And you could look at Calvin Ridley and feel very confident in him as a top 20 receiver, and it wouldn't be a problem. But the problem is that we're viewing him as this wide receiver one and trying to expect that kind of production out of him. And that's just not going to be the case. You just kind of have to accept here that you're buying a legitimate wide receiver too. And that is generally the upside that you are going to have. But because you've got this unique combination of him being perceived as very, very low value, because everyone wants to view him as something that he's not, right? But the cost is way down on him. And on top of that, you've also got the age factor where, he's hitting 30. You look at him and you say, do I want to invest in a 30-year-old receiver that I don't think is a true wide receiver one? I do think this is one of those unique situations where you're not looking at it and saying, okay, I think he's got maybe 1 or 2 years. There's not a lot of wear and tear in terms of NFL usage on Calvin Ridley. He was an older rookie. He debuted in 2018 as a 24-year-old. He missed that year due to the gambling suspension. He's only played 6 seasons. Realistically here, Ridley is going to give us several seasons. So if you're in a win now position and you need a very cheap, solid wide receiver 2-piece, just to add some depth, maybe a guy that you even want to, maybe you're stacked at receiver and you want to upgrade in your flex option as well. Ridley is a guy that you can get on the cheap and make that little push there. And he's a guy that you're also investing on the cheap, but you know that you can get multi-year usage out of him. The odds of Tennessee moving on to him, very slim to none. I do think that there is a potential out after this year, but regardless of that, he's actually very cap friendly for the remainder of his contract. So we're looking at a guy in a rebuilding team that is the wide receiver one. He doesn't really have, I know we want to, I know people want to feel a certain type of way of the potential of new rookie receivers coming in there because we had a lot of hype around certain ones heading into the draft season, and they didn't get that draft capital that we thought. But at the end of the day, Ridley is the clear wide receiver one there, locked into multiple seasons, going to be building with Cam Ward in a situation where they're going to be trying to put him in very rookie-friendly situations. So this can pan out well for Calvin Ridley to produce those low-end wide receiver 2 value, that those numbers that you want to get out of a solid flex play, be very reliable from that perspective, more consistency. This is a significant upgrade from what he was playing with last season, right? He has more in him. If you even look back to Jacksonville, the numbers in Jacksonville were actually good. The problem was that we just expected, we had this expectation that he was going to go back to that top 10 production that he gave that 1 year in Atlanta. And as long as we set our expectations realistically and you do the math there, it's actually a very cheap, reasonable buy. So hear me out on that one. Other potential buys there, very, very, very cheap option. You could also stick in Tennessee and go with Tyler Lockett. Again, we've got the rookies to contend with there, but he very easily should operate as the wide receiver 2 there because of age, again, and situation and team. You're very not having to invest in lots, or if you're just looking to stack a little volume there. And then another very cheap option, because he don't have a team right now, it is Keenan Allen. He will eventually land somewhere. Last year was kind of a weird year for him. Obviously, Chicago was a little bit confused in terms of target share, but he did get volume. And I think he's just looking for the right spot. And at this point, you can get him for dirt cheap, very little investment. So if you're looking to kind of take a chance there, that he can land in an advantageous situation where he can provide some volume, that's an option with Keenan Allen as well. Before we move on to, so those are my buys, guys. Again, just to recap it there, buys there in terms of veteran wide receivers over 30, Devontae Adams, and Mike Evans and Calvin Ridley. Those are my buys. Now we're going to go on to the sells here, guys, that I'm not investing in. I don't like it. I can't get behind it. But before we do that, I did get a nice mailbag question here that I want to read from Rick Troll, from Twitter. Do you think today's society is oversaturated with sports? I'm thinking about how little hype the NBA Finals had, despite being great games, And I'm realizing that in general, I don't feel as into games and highlights and ESPN as when I was younger. Do you feel like we need, or do we need less or more? I love this question. Again, this one was one that I wanted to kind of like respond to off the rip and just kind of, and it's timely with the NBA finals. I don't think we're oversaturated with sports, but I do feel like hot takes and controversial takes have made us care a little bit less about sports itself, to the point where I feel like as viewers, a lot of times, and maybe I'm guilty of this sometimes, as a viewer of sports, sometimes I feel like we need too much of a storyline now to get into sports. Like before, it was just it is what it is, right? Um, it is what it is. We were like, okay, NBA finals are on. We're watching it, right? Growing up, 10, 20 years ago, you get hyped, you get excited. You're excited to see, no matter what the matchup was, it was going to be intriguing. You had the superstars, you were pumped about it. Super Bowls, you were pumped about it. March Madness, you were pumped about it. Like everything was just fun, right? And now I wonder if maybe we're like a little bit over sensationalized because of the hot takes. I pride myself in not being a hot take artist. I do very reasonably mild, digestible takes here. Not everything has to be sensationalized, but now we're so used to things being sensationalized, it's not super fun for us to just watch straight clips and highlights, right? Or get into the actual games itself. And I was a wee bit guilty of this. Now, granted, I was pumped, and I felt bad because everyone was like, oh, small market teams, NBA finals, we're not excited about it. I was excited about it, and I think storyline kind of drove this one for me. So maybe I'm being a little bit hypocritical. I was excited about it from the perspective of seeing an underdog, I did, I won't lie, I wanted the Pacers to win. I was cheering for Tyrese Halliburton. It was just the storyline of him being voted the most underrated or overrated player in the league, and all of the miraculous game-winning shots. I like the hilarious jokes of the Halliburton. That was all fun and games, right? The memes were everything. Pascal Siakam, like it was fun, and it was a good storyline. But it's weird. It's weird. I feel like people kind of can't get past that or can't get into it because they still need their superstars in it. I'm not going to name any names, but I do know someone personally that once LeBron and Steph were eliminated, they were done. That was it. They're like, okay. They didn't want to watch another. And I tried to sell it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Look at what they could do. And oh my gosh, look at Tyrese Halliburton doing the choke. And like, I tried to sell it, but it didn't interest them. So I don't know, man. It's weird. I feel like the NFL does a good job of transitioning us to the new young hot players and getting us all hyped about the new potential young faces of the league. And then those faces actually like pay off and, make it to the playoffs or make deep pushes, a Jane Daniels, right? You can transition that and build off of that. So, maybe it's different, different leagues, different commissioners, different styles and whatnot and concepts. But I do feel like the NFL as a whole does a good job of keeping us interested and maintaining, storylines and whatnot. If only they didn't, transition to make us buy like 5,000 apps in order to watch all of the games. But that's another issue, right? Moving on to the fades. So good mailbag question. I enjoyed that one. I'm still heartbroken over the Pacers losing. That was, oh my God, that was painful watching the Achilles injury, which by the way, and maybe this is a football thing. We not seen so many Achilles snap at this point that the second that we're watching somebody and they show the replay and you look at the calf, you're like, oh, that was torn. I hate that. I hate watching that. Anyway, back to the fades, wide receivers, veteran wide receivers over 30. I've got several for you here. I'm going to start off here with Stephon Diggs with the New England Patriots now, and it has nothing to do with the off the field stuff that he was doing. He looked like he was having fun, but hey, he got back, was in camp, in OTAs, practicing, running around, looking good. I was a little bit worried. My concern is that you have these players, these older veteran receivers coming up. I got scared. I'm not going to lie that it was going to be an Odell situation, right? Where you have somebody transitioning to a new team, doesn't pay off. We've got injury situations. Like there's a whole bunch of factors that can play into it. So him coming off of the ACL is concerning for me. It's good to see him out there though, because my concern months ago was him potentially not being available to start the season at all. That was the issue, but it seems like he will be on track for that. But let's dive into why Stefon Diggs is a fade for me this season. And it's interesting because I have actually been a Stefon Diggs defender in the past for several years. I mean, I would break down the stats in order to justify, like, I get, there were legitimate reasons, because as we have seen, unfortunately for him, and why it makes him a fade is that unlike a Mike Evans, who, got injured, came back, had incredibly strong production, we're like, oh, no regression here. He's good to go. Unlike a Devontae Adams, who was able to switch to another team that's a complete disaster and still put up those big numbers. And we know that we can trust these guys in terms of the volume that they're going to be giving us throughout the season. We can't trust that with Stefon Diggs, unfortunately. And I've defended it because there have been legitimate reasons, right? In 2022 and 2023, we saw dramatic end of season drop-offs after hot starts for Stefon Diggs. I mean, he would just, first half of the season, he would be on fire, on a roll, looking like a top 5 receiver. You're like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then back half of the season, it's like, where did he go? Where did he go? And, as somebody who was defending Stefon Diggs at the time, I was looking into it, and there were reasons. In 2022, his drop-off was directly tied to that elbow injury that Josh Allen had. Allen's stats dipped in terms of pass volume. It was tied. It was correlated. You could see it like visually. I was like, okay, I'm making an excuse for him. I know that the back half was bad. I don't believe it's regression. I believe that it was tied to Josh Allen's elbow injury. 2023 had the exact same back half drop off. But I went back and I tried to justify it, right? I was like, okay, well, that could be the result of an offensive shift, right? A change in philosophy. The Bills fired Ken Dorsey. They moved on to Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. There was a clear and present choice in terms of how they changed or how Joe Brady changed how the offense was functioning. Stefon Diggs was not the only receiver that suffered. Gabe Davis also suffered as well. So you can justify it and say they just shifted the offense and what they were doing. And it worked, so there's no criticism there. But it didn't work in terms of the volume that Stefon Diggs was used to seeing. So you could justify it there. But then you go to 2024, and the start wasn't flashy. It was solid. It was okay. He was averaging 12.6 fantasy points per game and half PPR, wide receiver 15. It's cool and all. But again, it wasn't really highly impressive. And you can make excuses and say, oh, CJ Stroud had regression, the offensive line, there were issues and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you start to wonder, man, is it just Stefon Diggs? Have we just been seeing the progressive regression of Diggs over the past several years? Now we've got him in New England. We're expecting him to operate as the wide receiver 1. There is potential contention there in terms of, I do think he will operate as the wide receiver 1, but we do have to look at this and say, obviously, we're going back to previous New England offenses, right? In terms of this being now Josh McDaniels, who was back as the offensive coordinator again. Sorry, I was thinking about Josh McDaniels and Ramondre Stevenson, and we talked about that on the last show. And Damian Harris and James White, and did we talk about that on? I believe we did. And how potentially the vision of Josh McDaniels can taint the potential upside for Travion Henderson. But there is the consideration that you have to put into that, is that we know what this offense is going back to. Will there be enough volume for Stefon Diggs to be the payoff at his ADP, which isn't bad, right? It isn't bad, but at the end of the day, it's going to continue to rise as he gets closer into training camp. He is the wide receiver 1. The main competition that he has is a rookie, Kyle Williams. So obviously he's popped. It's possible that Kyle Williams can make that impact. And we've got Demario Douglas as well. And so when we're looking at that, the opportunity should be there for Diggs, but we've got a 31-year-old wide receiver coming off an ACL, very risky. You worry that this is just something that you don't want to make a long-term investment into. So when it comes to Dynasty, I cannot get behind it, even if it is at a deflated price, right? When we talked about Calvin Ridley, I talked about the fact that all of those issues that he has in terms of lack of production, bad offense, all of that is baked into his cost, right? You're not having to buy him overpriced. You're getting him at a very reasonable offer there. And you're getting the same thing with Diggs, but unfortunately, you don't get that reassurance that he is going to be a usable asset for multiple years to come. So it's difficult for me to get behind that. In terms of redraft and best ball, the ADP is going to appear to be reasonable. So I'm not mad at you if you want to make that investment. I have not found myself leaning into it just because I'd rather take higher upside options because I fear the production is just going to be what we have come to expect from him over the past several years. And it's just below expectations, unfortunately. Got a question from Tootsie Pop 6, Rachel in the chat. Will you see me at the expo? I don't know yet, unfortunately. The Fantasy Football Expo in a month and a half. It's a weird timing. I got my two boys, and my youngest is 5 and he's starting kindergarten. And so Friday will absolutely be the meet the teacher day. I know that for sure. So if I can make it, I would have to be like a Saturday 1-day trip. So I'm going to try and work that out, but I don't know for sure yet. And then thoughts on Cooper Kupp, which is perfect. We talked about that one a little bit earlier. No. Wait, did I? No, that's actually perfect. I'm talking about Cooper Kupp right now. That one's on the list. So you got me there. Yeah, let's talk about Cooper Kupp next. Cooper Kupp for me, this is a tricky one. It's really tough. Because when we're looking at Cooper Kupp, I want to lean into it because I do think that he and Jackson Smith-Njigba can work very well together. Particularly if Kupp operates underneath, he could benefit from volume there. Obviously, we've seen that with Tyler Lockett in the past, and I feel like Kupp can, in different offenses, right? We got to remember that it won't be a direct transition, and we're seeing adjustments in the offense as well, changes in offensive coordinator and whatnot. But my concern with Cooper Kupp is kind of twofold here. First issue here is that I am mildly concerned about Sam Darnold. I don't want to be because I actually really like Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I want this to be a perfect marriage. I have been leaning into a lot of JSN, and it is a hope that Seattle's offensive line is going to turn around and be good because objectively they were terrible last year. And we also know what Sam Darnold looks like behind a bad offensive line. My opinion on Kupp would potentially change if I could feel some level of comfort that this offensive line was going to take a significant leap. But I'm not feeling super confident in it. They made some investments, right? But I don't know if they did enough. And that's a weird one here because you would think what you're getting in Sam Darnold and you know how critical it is to stay upright. He's one of those quarterbacks, and there's nothing wrong with that. Jared Goff is one of those quarterbacks, and I love him. As long as you can keep them upright, it's all good. But you got to keep them upright. So that's my only concern there is that my worry is that the offensive line is rushed and not going to give them a lot of time. In addition to that, when we're kind of looking at a guy like Mike Evans and Devontae Adams, we talked about the fact that we have not seen any type of regression from him. I am concerned that we have been overlooking regression for Cooper Kupp, unfortunately. I feel like it has been screaming at us to get prepared for the regression. And I feel like we've been ignoring it because, my God, he's Cooper Kupp and we know what he can give us. But just kind of looking at the numbers there, since 2022, 12 is the maximum number of games he has played in a season. He has failed to hit 1,000 yards or double-digit touchdowns since 2021. And technically speaking, he's only actually hit that 2 seasons in his entire career. It is a weird situation where unlike a Mike Evans is incredibly reliable, incredibly steady. We know he doesn't have that overall wide receiver one upside, and that's not his fault. That's just kind of the function of the way he's utilized, and his talent is through the roof. But realistically, a lot of stuff has to happen in terms of him being the only guy out there, right? Tampa has too many weapons. We just have never seen him in a situation where he would be able to put up those stupid overall wide receiver one numbers. But we know that he has been incredibly steady, incredibly reliable. We don't have to worry about volatility in his production. Cooper Kupp is not the same. He's the exact opposite. His stealing is just astronomical, potentially like the highest level, right, for a receiver. But his reliability it's kind of in the basement right now, unfortunately. At the same time, you kind of look at things that happen and you kind of make an excuse and say, well, the addition of Puka Nacua did cause some natural regression. There were injuries and whatnot, and that's true, right? But that could also be the body just breaking down. He turns 32 in a couple weeks. I feel like the end is creeping in close, and that is my worry with him. But I've got two different opinions on Kupp. When it comes to Dynasty, he is not a buy for me whatsoever. I can't justify it because of the ceiling that he offers. The perceived value for him is just way too high, in my opinion. I do not believe, and I say this as someone who's got Kupp, I don't believe that I can sell Cooper Kupp for value that I would like to get out of him. The value that people have is the perception of just how high that ceiling is. So you're not going to be making a low end investment on him. And unfortunately, with the injury risk, potentially not having a full season, and if the injury risk comes, more than likely it would come in terms of the back half of the season and kind of be pointless for you as a contender pushing for a Dynasty championship. So in Dynasty, I don't like it as a buy. In redraft and best ball, I don't really care. Injury concern and whatnot, yeah, but the ADP is very agreeable. It's very agreeable. And I don't know that we will see anything during training camp that is going to make his ADP aggressively rise. So I'm okay with investing in him in redraft and best ball. No issue whatsoever. I think the ADP is nice. Hey, if the injury happens, it happens. You didn't make an aggressive cost investment in him. So it's a split decision there. Dynasty recommendation. I'm not down with buying redraft and best ball. Draft away. I don't think it's an issue. Other potential fades here. These are not controversial ones whatsoever. Amari Cooper. When I look at Keenan Allen, right, as a free agent, I say, hey, he's going to land somewhere and he'll be able to provide you some fantasy value, and the cost is super cheap. So, hey, lean into it. Like in best ball, I've been doing, late rounds, you're just drafting him, and it's just like, hey, whatever. It's not an investment. My worry is I don't really see a reality. There's a very real reality, actually, where Amari Cooper goes the Odell Beckham route and is not actually with a team for the majority of the season, unfortunately. Potentially waits until he gets into a situation where he can land with a Super Bowl contending team, whatnot. So, hey, and that's fine. But I don't think it's worth any remote kind of investment in him. DeAndre Hopkins is another one there. The volume just doesn't justify it, really. He's wide receiver 2 or 3 at best. Quite frankly, possibly really wide receiver 3 there in terms of the investment that they've shown that they genuinely see value in Rashad Bateman. So wide receiver 3 in an offense with mediocre pass volume. No, thank you. And Adam Thielen, another super cheap guy, but more than likely, I think he'll take a backseat into all of the incoming youth there. So I don't think that one is worth the investment. That was probably not so controversial. There is one more big name that I want to talk about before we wrap things up. It is, can you take a guess? Can you take a guess? What big name over age 30 have we not talked about? It's Tyreek Hill. It's Tyreek Hill. And this is a situational one. It's very interesting, right? Because it's tough to judge. Last year because of the wrist injury. And then we also have him still technically recovering. He had surgery, recently-ish to remove the screws. But I don't know if this is something that we should be aggressively concerned about. The injury was serious, but again, we're talking about a wrist injury for an older receiver compared to an ACL injury like Stephon Diggs. I think those are two very completely different things. So injury does not play a massive role in it. It appears from everything that I've seen that he'll be ready for week 1. So that's not a major issue here. The biggest issue that I have is I'm not looking at Tyreek Hill's production last year and saying that I believe it was regression. For me, I can make an excuse. Maybe I'm making the Stephon Diggs excuses again, maybe. But with Tyreek Hill, my God, it wasn't just him. It was the entire offense. When Tua Tagovailoa goes down or struggles, I mean, it knocks everyone out. It's wild that, I mean, oh my God, I'm crossing my fingers that Tua can have a healthy season or that they can find a stable, competent backup quarterback. One of these guys, is got to work out between Zach Wilson and rookie is Quinn Ewers. One of these guys, so cross our fingers, has to work out because the stability of the offense when Tua Tagovailoa goes down is scary. It's like in a truly like nightmare scenario there. The fact that it can just knock everyone out, inclusive of the running back, where you can have a running back in HN that has a astronomical stupid ceiling, and then Tua Tagovailoa goes out and you're hoping you can get double-digit fantasy points out of him. It's wild. But when I'm looking at that Miami offense and Tyreek Hill, I'm not concerned about Tyreek Hill. I am literally only concerned about Tua Tagovailoa in the way that he truly demolishes the offense when he is gone or injured. And again, there's also the issue where, and this has played a factor. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the strength of schedule for Tampa Bay. End of season schedule has been a major factor in how I have viewed Tua Tagovailoa in the entire Miami offense, particularly the receivers, because Tua in cold weather games just don't add up. And I don't judge him for that. He likes the island weather. I'm a Southern girl. I like the Southern weather. If you asked me to go do a podcast out in the snow, I'd probably fail. I'd be stuttering and stumbling and giving you wrong information and then telling you to start guys that aren't even probably starting. But so I identify with Tua when it comes to those struggles. But it makes it hard to trust him because, unfortunately, due to the division that he's in, year after year, he has gotten into these situations where he ends up being in playoff season, fantasy playoff season, cold weather, away games, very bad situations that just don't add up. And that's always been a factor for me in terms of why I just never have any shares. And if I have any shares, they are gone by mid-season because I know that the back half is going to be a complete disaster. But we were talking about strength of schedule. And one of those games that's talked about for Tampa Bay is a game in Miami. Miami finally has a good end of season schedule. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. We finally actually have a season, playoff season schedule that is relatively favorable for him. There are a couple of cold locations in early December, but specifically in week 16 and 17, second round and championship week, very, very favorable games at home versus favorable defenses. And that as a whole makes me feel so much better about the Miami Dolphins. I'm not looking over my shoulder trying to figure out when things are going to go sideways. I am okay with the investment into Tyreek Hill, but it is situational, right? Because when we're looking at Dynasty, when we're looking at guys like Mike Evans and Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs and whatnot, and Calvin Ridley and Cooper Kupp, no one is coming around and saying, you got to give me a first. And unfortunately, with Tyreek Hill, the perception is no one's given up Tyreek Hill for a mid-second. It's not happening, right? It's unrealistic. Even at 31 years old, the ceiling that he has, the price is just not the level that you're going to get for other receivers around the same age. It's a risk, right? It's a risk. You're still getting decent value for the player that he can be, but you have to realize that you're investing in an incredibly risky asset, and you need to be in a position where you can afford to pay that. And you are absolutely saying that this is a guy that I feel like, if Tua stays healthy, will win me a championship. When it comes to redraft and best ball, zero issues, provided we don't get any weird kind of ominous news over the next month or so regarding the wrist and the recovery. His ADP is very, very reasonable right now. He is actually one of these guys where I think I talked last week about T. Higgins and the problem that I have with T. Higgins. When you're drafting T. Higgins and you can swing around, I don't have ADP up right now. But when you're drafting T. Higgins and there's guys like Tyreek Hill that you can pass over and draft and set, like it doesn't make logical sense to me. Guys that can put up, have a much higher ceiling than somebody like that. So yeah, Tyreek Hill, the value that you're getting for him at his ADP, if Tua stays healthy for the majority of the season, I genuinely believe we're looking at Tyreek Hill as, maybe we don't say top, overall wide receiver one upside, just because there's way too much competition, right? With Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, there's just way, way too much competition at the top, but easily wide receiver, top 10 wide receiver, very much so hittable for him if Tua stays healthy. Like, just give it 15 games in the season. So that's an investment that I feel super comfortable with making. But that wraps things up. I appreciate you all joining in. We had a good crowd tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. As a reminder, if you could, please subscribe to the podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy Podcast, on all platforms if you are not already subscribed. And also to the Player Profiler. We are live on the Player Profiler Now channel. So if you want to subscribe to that in order to get the notifications for going live, you can do that. And of course, if you want to subscribe to me, as always, you can find me literally anywhere at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME. Super easy for you. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. And we are inching closer and closer to training camp. So, my God, I feel like it's just around the corner, guys. Super excited. Let's keep things going strong this off season, right? So appreciate you all tuning in. I will see you again next week. Other than that, if you have any questions or anything, as always, tag me on anywhere on social media or drop them, and I'll get them into the show. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll talk to you all later next